The Chicago Bears claim to have found their quarterback one for now. But what's that mean for Allen Robinson's dynasty value? We'll talk about that today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co-host, Chris Allen. Chris, Andy Dalton, yay or nay?
And again, you sound like all smooth, like, hey, how are we doing? All right, so let's hop into it, though. Andy Dalton in Chicago. I don't mind it, to be quite honest. If you look at what he did when he was in Dallas, he took over for Dak Prescott. Their neutral passing rate was still top 12. I think it was actually 12th in the league by the end of the 2020 season. So from a pass volume perspective, I would hope that while Chicago lagged behind fast-paced offenses like Dallas, I think they were 16th or 17th in neutral passing rate. I mean, the volume should still be there for a guy like Allen Robinson. I mean, they changed quarterbacks, but if we look at the comparables between Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles, I mean, Andy Dalton isn't that much worse or better. I think it's more or less a one-for-one swap, if not a slight step up, depending on which metric that you want to use. But for Allen Robinson specifically, it's not like they went and added wide receivers or more tight ends or more pass catchers that would conflict with Allen Robinson's target share, which is sat at about 24-25% for the past few seasons. Mm-hmm. So changing a quarterback, unless it was just a complete disaster at quarterback, it's not going to change his value in terms of dynasty. Still top 20. Still can slot him in for that alpha wide receiver target share, 25%. His ADOT 9.7 this past season, that falls in line with the rest of the premier wide receivers in the league. I mean, Devontae Adams has something similar. Tyreek Hill has something similar. I mean, while we want some of those home runs, I mean, being able to work at all levels of the field is what Allen Robinson has shown us he's been able to do since he became a star almost 4 seasons ago. So from a dynasty standpoint, Allen Robinson at the very least should sustain, his value is sustained with this move, because it's him, it's Darnell Mooney, it's Anthony Miller possibly leaving, Tariq Cohen coming back, and Damian Williams. I mean, these are not guys that are going to challenge out like A-Rob for targets. So at least for me, Andy Dalton to the Bears, completely fine with it from a fantasy perspective or from the perspective of Allen Robinson.
Right, we're putting together this show, and we're talking about coming in with my silky smooth voice
at you're trying to sound like Sig
at Allen Robinson as a top 10 wide receiver, and we say, wait a second, is he a top 10 wide receiver? Wide receiver 17, just about anywhere you look, and we're seeing guys ahead of him so Calvin Ridley was wide receiver 9 in a lot of places, and we were like, that's probably my one-for-one comparison for Allen Robinson. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing with Allen Robinson. Andy Dalton is probably the best quarterback that he's played with in his career. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. Yeah. Actually, I will say he is, in my opinion, he absolutely is the best quarterback that Allen Robinson's played with. So we're looking at another probably 160 targets. He's 27. He's going to be coming up on really his first opportunity to hit huge in free agency in his next contract. So you're talking about buying Allen Robinson at wide receiver 17, probably going to get something like 150 to 160 targets. He's going to be competing with guys like Stephon Diggs for the most targets at the position in the league, and they're not going to franchise him again. There's no way. It's going to be an insane amount of money to franchise a wide receiver the second time around. So it's really a good time to buy, in my opinion, at wide receiver 17. And maybe he doesn't ascend, but he's going to mean so much to your roster with that many targets and the opportunity to get paid big, like the next guy we're going to talk about.
Right. I think that's the easiest way to look at it. And as you mentioned, I mean, he's got the 1-year holdover. Contract situation might make folks a little gun shy in terms of wanting to buy in on him, but it's one of those, if you bet on yourself, you wind up getting a much larger, or at least a contract that will take him to the end of his career. And he winds up moving and going to a different offense, so much the better. I mean, we can't really see at this point, we can't really see his situation getting worse. Yep. So at the very least, I can see him sustaining his value, not just for 2021, but for the next few seasons, as he's still a primary wide receiver in the NFL. But one guy I am concerned about, is Kenny Golladay. I mean, talk me off the ledge here, because I'm looking at his situation.
Mhm.
Now, from a real life standpoint, the man secured the bag. I mean, and kudos to him for trying to work for what he felt that he was worth and getting that long-term deal. But for us fantasy managers, I mean, are we the ones left holding the bag? Because when Kenny Golladay was the man in Detroit, it was targets, it was high ADOT, it was touchdowns, it was yardage, it was everything. And his only target competition was, at least for the last couple of seasons, TJ Hawkinson, while we're waiting for him to become a premier tight end, and like Marvin Jones.
Mhm.
But now he goes to New York. Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley. I mean, if you want to throw in Kyle Rudolph, go ahead. But I mean, I just named off at least 4 legitimate assets, and they're tied to, at the very least, a questionable quarterback in Daniel Jones.
Mhm.
Bobby Koch might come after me for making fun of his Giants. But I mean, shouldn't that be a concern for us? I mean, tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I think something we don't do in Dynasty enough is follow the money. I mean, you go down that yellow brick road and you end up at Kenny Golladay in the Brinks truck. So they paid him for something, right? And yes, you can mention Sterling Shepard, and yes, you can mention Darius Slayton, but where have they been the past 2 years? Darius Slayton really popped off, and his Dynasty value really popped off. And then what happened? It's taken a plummet because they're in the Joe Judge offense, right? They've got Daniel Jones at quarterback. So those are legitimate concerns, but the target share I don't think is going to be a problem. And I think he's going to end up being one of those high ADOT guys because Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard are going to be so adept at running those short to intermediate routes that Kenny Golladay is going to get the job done on 4 catches a game, 5 catches a game. I mean, I played DFS. I played Kenny Golladay in cash multiple times last year, and you're pulling your hair out the entire game until the last quarter when he catches 4 for 105 and a touch. That's just the nature of him as a dynasty asset. I will say one thing to talk you off the edge: his value hasn't taken a huge increase. He's actually going to be back to back with JuJu, who's the last person we're going to get to in this segment, and if we're talking about the difference between those two, I'm going to say I'd much prefer Kenny Golladay, given that I think that his target share is going to at least remain similar to what we've seen with the Lions, even with a little bit better assets in the New York Giants.
Okay. All right. I think you got me sold, at least for the time being. But okay. All right. So who are we talking about next?
So we have JuJu Smith-Schuster next, and I actually think that people are going to come for me. I don't think this was that bad of an idea. So JuJu Smith-Schuster took a 1-year deal for $7 million with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The crazy thing, though, is that he was offered more money from the Chiefs. So I'm not going to tell the man what to do with his money, but I think I'd prefer to catch passes from Patrick Mahomes than Ben Roethlisberger at this point in his career, and probably at any point in his Hall of Fame career. But with that being said, I think JuJu's mentality in this situation, if I had to guess, is with such a weird cap situation going through the league this year, it's been very hard to get those contracts for these premier players, which is even more of an indicator for Kenny Golladay. He was able to secure not just a good contract for this cap situation, but a good contract in general. 4 years, $72 million is massive. So for JuJu, I think that he wanted to stay in a similar situation, have a decent season, and then test the market next year. Now, the problem with that is if they're going to utilize him the same way, the Steelers, if they're going to utilize JuJu the same way that they did last season, because maybe Ben Roethlisberger's arm is falling off, I don't know what's really going on there, then we're going to have problems with JuJu's long-term value. But we have to remember, this was a top 5 dynasty asset just 365 days ago, maybe a little bit more. He was so young. He had the incredible season with Antonio Brown. So he's wide receiver 25 to 30 range right now and going back to back with Kenny Golladay. Yes, I did say I'd prefer Kenny Golladay, but I think at their price, both of them are solid assets because they've already been surpassed by your CeeDee Lambs, hell, your Jamar Chases, your Brandon Ayuk's, things like that. And, JuJu's just as old as some of these guys that are coming out, and he's already got a well over 1,000-yard season under his belt. I think the smart money is to put it on JuJu and see what happens in free agency next year.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense. And I think from a dynasty perspective, really his return to Pittsburgh just puts that shadow over Deontay Johnson, Mapletron, because I know a lot of folks were really excited about Chase Claypool, like after his first season. So, I mean, my issue with Juju, though, is still the lack of, I guess, the lack of downfield targets. That's my problem with him. I mean, he really has been typecasted into that slot receiver role. I mean, it's much worse than Jarvis Landry, where the jokes around Jarvis Landry was like he was, 7 for 77,
glorified running back.
I mean, he would have like those slot machine type numbers, because he was just like, he would be consistent. He was like 6 for 66, 8 for 80, like that sort of stuff.
Right.
But after he came to Cleveland, we started seeing more of him downfield. I mean, heck, he was even being used as a decoy, like a fake quarterback on some trick plays. But we haven't seen that from Juju. We haven't seen any other hybrid utility from Juju since he came into the league. It's been 6, 7, 8 yards down the field, and he can try and outrun whomever he can, like after he gets to that point. I mean, but even in 2020, like Eric Ebron was passing him up for downfield targets. So from a dynasty perspective, it completely makes sense that you would want Kenny Golladay over a guy like Juju, because from a production standpoint, week in and week out, we know that at least there's a chance that Kenny Golladay can surpass the century mark from a yardage perspective. I can't say the same about JuJu Smith-Schuster. He might get you just 50 yards and you're just stuck holding the bag.
Sure, and you can't buy everybody, so I understand that, but Juju's so young and has already shown the ability to succeed in this league. And honestly, when he goes on to get a next contract, he's probably not going to be getting this Kenny Golladay contract to be the guy. And if that's what it takes for him to get back to those numbers next to AB, yes, I understand AB was a Hall of Famer, but it doesn't matter. If Juju's not the primary target, then he might excel. And we actually kind of saw that towards the end of last year. Unfortunately, it came at the kind of self-demise of Deontay Johnson. I mean, Deontay Johnson he's like, please don't pass me the ball anymore. I've had enough. I'm tired. He's getting to 19 targets a game some games, and like, not literally, but I mean, it feels like it. And he'll end with 8 catches, 7 catches. You're like, man, he caught a lot of passes. Well, yeah, he was targeted 32 times. So I'd imagine he should. And towards the end, he even got benched a game. I remember that. So, and then Juju came on strong towards the end of the year. I mean, didn't we see 190 some yard performance in that last game there? And I think he had multiple touchdowns. So, I mean, the ceiling's still going to be there for him. It's really just, if you're going to buy him, you're going to buy him now, because a contract's coming next year from somebody. I mean, he's not leaving the league. Yeah. And if your problem is he can't be a premier guy, you don't have to be the guy to put up fantasy points. Chris Godwin puts up fantasy points. Jarvis Landry has always put up fantasy points. So if you're going to buy him at wide receiver 30, and then hold him for a year. He'll be your wide receiver 3 or 4 this year. Fine. But he can get back up to that top 12 startup ADP, in my opinion.
I'm hoping that's the case. But I mean, we've got questions for Kenny Golladay and his situation. We've got questions about JuJu Smith-Schuster and his situation. But Adam, I got a question for you though. I mean, do you like winning your fantasy leagues? I know it sounds like a basic question, but you got to ask sometimes. You got to ask folks if that's really what their drive is when it comes to doing this thing that we wind up arguing about week in and week out. So, I mean, but was that what you want to do? Do you like winning your fantasy leagues?
Well, I like revenue. I care about my ROI. So, yeah, I do. But I don't know if I got time to be winning all of my fantasy leagues.
All right. Well, I mean, if that's true, I mean, I know you're a busy man. I mean, you're talking to us from a hotel room, for goodness sakes. I mean, for anybody that's watching this video later, I mean, give kudos to Adam for the commitment that he's actually podcasting from a hotel somewhere in New Jersey. I mean, but so it sounds like you need help, and that's what Footballguys, a premium subscription from Footballguys, would provide to you. I mean, it gives you that edge that you need in order to make the winning decisions like for your roster. And so for serious players like yourself, the time is now. In order to go ahead and get signed up for the 2021 season, head over to footballguys.com, show you the example right here. Click over here on the join now, big orange button, like right when you show up, or right when you pull up to the site. And then afterwards, it'll walk you through all the pricing and whatever. I mean, look at this, man. You got folks like Matthew Berry coming and commenting on the site. I mean, what more could you ask for in regards to sponsorship or promotion when it comes to trying to join a site like Footballguys? So if that's what you want to do, if that's what you want to be, a consistent winning player, go over and hop on over to the Footballguys. They're doing their early bird discount that's still available now. So go to footballguys.com, click the orange button that I showed you, and that'll take you right to the early discount page. So footballguys.com, and said their tagline, and I'm just reading this off because it's the ad read, so don't get mad at me. We'll do the work, you do the winning. So, hey, I can't argue with that. So moving on to our next segment. So we want to talk about a couple of guys that, I mean, in free agency, we were talking about the wide receivers that got their deals and they changed teams. But now we're going to look at a couple of guys that they got their deals, but they stayed home. So Chris Carson, James White. Chris Carson gets the 3-year deal in Seattle. James White gets the 1-year deal to stay with Belichick and Cam Newton. I mean, how are you approaching either of those situations from a dynasty perspective? Because I like the Chris Carson deal. I'm not too sure about the James White deal, though.
I see you learned your lesson about advising people on fantasy football after your Damian Williams and Jerick McKinnon. You had to throw your disclaimer into our live read so that nobody came.
I had to throw it in there.
Yeah, don't tell people to go draft McKinnon or Damian Williams at their highest possible peak.
That's Super Bowl MVP Damian Williams.
In an alternate universe, he is. So first player on the docket is Chris Carson. This is the main one we want to talk about for the rest of the show. Best possible scenario for Chris Carson. I mean, he's staying in Seattle. He's staying in a run-first offense, and it's even going to be more run-first because first, Russ messed up not cooking a couple times, and then he got caught in the kitchen. And now he requested a trade, or technically did not, but it would be nice to go to these 4 teams if you were going to trade me. Well, Seattle's sitting over there like, trade? I didn't say trade. He was like, hey, I'm just saying, just in case. So he put a little bug in their ear. So anyways, it's going to be even less cooking, in my opinion. And Chris Carson he's like a penny, and you can shine a penny all you want, but you still got a penny. And that's how a lot of dynasty players think about Chris Carson. But honestly, he's pretty valuable. He's probably going to finish as a top 12 running back if he stays healthy, which has been a concern. And honestly, I could see him finishing as a top 12 running back the next 3 years. I mean, that's a great contract for him. It's not so much that they're going to try to dump him in the next year or so. 3-year deal is as good as you can ask for on a second contract for a running back. So they got him at reasonable money. They got him at maybe a hometown discount, got him in a great offense. And just the psychology surrounding a player like that, it took us so long to come around to Chris Carson being good. I mean, Rashad Penny got drafted in the first round, and then it was, okay, there's no way Chris Carson can hold the job from Rashad Penny. And then Chris Carson gets hurt, and it was, okay, there's no way Chris Carson's going to take the reins back when he gets back, and then he does. So all these no ways just keep adding up to where, yes, his value is not going to ascend very much, but you could potentially buy a top 12 running back for running back 18, 19, 20 prices. So I'm about getting Chris Carson in Dynasty for sure. And then you got James White. We're mentioning everyone rosterable, and that's going to be the baseline for our show. So if we feel like even in deeper leagues they're rosterable, we're going to try to mention them. And if you want to come at us because you've got an even deeper league, that's what we got the comments for. Let us know. So James White, another great situation because James White has been the Swiss Army knife for New England for years and years. So if you wanted to have any relevance from James White, if you wanted to get a few good games out of him, if you want to draft him in best ball, which is a fantastic place to draft James White, he's staying with New England. He's got a 1-year deal worth $2 million. And they seem to be gathering the cavalry. I don't know if it's a very good cavalry, but I guess they think they're going to try to win games next year. And now you got the last 2 for us, Chris. These are really, really, really important dynasty signings.
I'm hopeful. The Phillip Lindsay deal is just more. That's just sad for me, to be quite honest, because if you look at like his story being the UDFA, comes in 1,000-yard rusher, I mean, right out the gate, and then now like that value is just like dwindled like year over year. Like, but I don't think it's any lack of talent. It's just the way that the offense has changed around him. And so he moves over to Houston, which is even like, to me, it's almost an even worse situation. You've got obvious questions at the quarterback position with the allegations against Deshaun Watson, but now they've gotten rid of DeAndre Hopkins. Will Fuller is now in Miami. I mean, their wide receiver one is Brandon Cooks. And those are just the wide receivers, but now he has to play behind or alongside Mark Ingram, David Johnson. It's not even like the utility that Lindsay could provide as being both a rusher and a pass catcher. I mean, he doesn't even have that niche role anymore. I mean, Mark Ingram, like we saw what he could be at least a reliable receiver out of the backfield. The same thing with David Johnson, a converted wide receiver from however many years ago. So for Phillip Lindsay now to join this squad, it's like, what is his role? I mean, how do we see a path to significant touches for him? My hope for Phillip Lindsay, and this is my thought process behind looking at Denver kind of dangling him out there on the free agency market by giving him such a low tender, was that so he could go to a better situation that could feature his talents. And I was hoping that a team like San Francisco that would feature a zone blocking scheme, which would really benefit a guy like Phillip Lindsay, that would have been perfect for him. I mean, with the way that they had been with the way that Kyle Shanahan had been paying some of their running backs, I mean, more expensive deal for Jerick McKinnon, but for Tevin Coleman and Mostert, I mean, they've been paying like cheap running backs. So it seemed like Phillip Lindsay would fit right into that scheme and also their financials as well. But we just never saw that happen. So I'm just, I don't know. It's difficult to see any sort of value for Phillip Lindsay, like moving forward, and not just for the fact that he's more or less behind some of those guys, but just the offensive situation that he finds himself in with a personnel that's like completely bereft of, I guess, the talent that you'd want to invest in or surrounding him. I mean, I just can't see myself trying to pick him up, or, I mean, you can place him out on the trade block. I mean, you definitely would wind up having to package him in some sort of deal in order to get anything for him at this point. And then Adam Humphries, he's been one of those back end of the roster guys, might pop up for a decent game here or there. And when he was with Tennessee, I mean, he would be one of those guys that would pop up for, I mean, like a Cole Beasley type stat line, right? I mean, he might get those 6-7 targets, get up to 80, 90 yards, possibly score a touchdown, something like that. But it was never consistent enough in order for us to really buy into him. But that was because he was on a Tennessee squad that wasn't really featuring the passing game wasn't a huge amount of that, or at least the passing game enough to support 3 wide receivers. I mean, it was AJ Brown, wide receiver one season all day long. Corey Davis kind of hopping in, but then Adam Humphries would kind of be that guy that, I mean, if it wasn't Adam Humphries, it would maybe be Ferkser. I mean, it might be like Mecole Pruitt. I mean, they would just be one of those other guys that would be a part of that offense that would be kind of sprinkled about throughout the weeks. So for Adam Humphries, well, it's great seeing him great seeing him go to an offense that we think is fun, because we think the Washington offense is going to be fun, but we're already invested in Logan Thomas. We're already invested in Terry McLaurin, and we're definitely invested in Curtis Samuel and Antonio Gibson. So again, they're one of those back end of the roster guys. You hold them, you start them in a pinch if you need to. You package them in a deal to maybe, just kind of, here's a throw in. I mean, but that's essentially where like values like those guys lie. I mean, but until their situation changes, which for Humphries, I definitely can't see his situation changing. But for Lindsay, sure. I mean, if it's a 1-year deal, he might be able to move on to another place that can feature his talent better. But I mean, he'd be the only guy that I would at least be minorly interested in trying to keep on my roster at this point. So, I mean, that's all we got for this week. I mean, it's been a ton of news going on. I mean, and we're trying to like pick up and try and I guess digest it and turn it into the Dynasty, the news and analysis that you guys would want. But right now, I mean, especially with some of the pro days and stuff going on, it's all about the rookies, all about what's going on with like Elijah Moore's like 40 time that I saw today. Man, that boy was cooking. I mean, Rondell Moore. I mean, his vert. Oh my gosh! I mean, it's insane. I mean, and everybody's like up on that, but still, don't neglect the veterans. Don't neglect the guys that, I mean, especially right now with the hype for the rookies being so big at this point,
Right.
like in the off season, this would be the time to kind of slide into somebody's, DMs, be like, hey, what do you think about Chris Carson? Hey, what do you think about JuJu Smith-Schuster? I mean, now would be that time where, rookie picks being as valuable as they are. I mean, if you're interested in picking up a guy like Chris Carson, which I'm 100% with you, Adam, now would be the time to kind of try and work a deal with everybody wanting to get their share of the next big prospect that's coming out of college and joining the NFL. So, Adam, do we got anything else before we head on out of here?
That's it for me, man.
All right. So appreciate y'all coming out and checking us out. Episode number 2. Having a blast here working at Footballguys and doing this new thing, new project here with my partner. So for Chris Allen here at Chris Allen FFWX, Adam Wilde at AP Wilde, we'll catch y'all next week.
Go ahead to hit that subscribe button, and don't forget about the early bird special.